This video is brought to you by the Wellness Investors. The Wellness Investors are a collective of individuals with uniquely diverse backgrounds. Our goal is to inspire, motivate, and entertain, and start enhancing your life, one sector at a time.
Welcome to the Wellness Investors live from the Barnes studio. You got Chad here, and I'm joined by longtime friend Stephanie Bennett from SEMO Family Violence Council. What? Did I say it right?
Yeah, you did.
SEMO Family Violence Council.
A lot of times it's also referred to as a friend's place. And that started years ago when we got off of the name New Way Shelter. That's what it was incorporated as also. But saying that it was done more for the children on the school bus in a way, because the bus would pull up and the driver would be like, and this has been many years, I've been there for 18 years. He would be like, shelter kids, like,
yeah,
it's bad enough that we have to live there.
Yeah.
Do we have to announce it? So now he can just say, or anybody can say, if you say, where do you stay? Oh, I stay at a friend's place. I mean,
I see.
Sounds a little bit better than,
awesome.
But then we also try to go with the aspect where we don't want people to be ashamed they're staying there, because a lot of times they've been ashamed of things that they've had to experience for years. So this is a time to kind of be proud of yourself for making that step, but we know society, and sometimes they're bullies. So.
And if you're in the Southeast Missouri area, I think you were probably familiar with your place, but you're not just a shelter.
No. And you think people are familiar, and then we speak to church groups or civic organizations or whatever. They were like, we had no idea you existed. And that's always interesting, because the agency, I'll go back a little bit. The agency was actually incorporated in 1995, and it was incorporated as just a hotline. And it was in a church basement, possibly the Presbyterian Church in Farmington, I think. And there was so many calls that were coming into this hotline, they realized what a need this area had for this. So the very first shelter was located next to the old Bonne Terre Hospital, and it was leased to the agency for $1 a year. And it was very, very small, but it was a safe haven for people to go. Yet it was always full, so you're always turning people away. And then in 1999, the director at the time, they wrote a big grant and did a lot of fundraising, and were able to build the new facility, which is located on Berry Road in Bonne Terre next to the Eagles. And even last week, I heard somebody say, they wanted to bring donations, and they asked somebody in town, and they were like, "Oh, we can't talk about where it's at." Well, it's a public location. We have a sign out front, so when people are bringing donations or whatever, it's not a secret, and that goes back again to be proud of that this is here and that you're taking the steps. But back to it being not just a shelter. So when I started in 2004. It was basically just a shelter, and we had a court advocate. So within the shelter, you have staff working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, answering a hotline, doing intakes. When people leave, cleaning up the room, helping with resources. Basically, you're working where people live. So anything that you need during the day, is what they're helping with. And then we were able to grow now, and we have a massive outreach program. So we have like 68 families in our outreach program. And those are people that either A, have lived in shelter, continue to need the services, or B, they may have never needed shelter. I mean, sometimes people still have supportive families, or they can afford to get a place on their own. So they never lived there, but they receive the support services. And that means coming to support group. They can come to our life skills group. We offer parenting classes, anger management classes. They can come do their laundry. We provide them Christmas. They can come over for Thanksgiving. So it's kind of like the benefits of, you as long as you stay engaged with the agency, then you get to still participate in and sometimes people don't want to stay. They don't want to stay engaged. they feel like they've healed, whatever it might be.
And I guess because of my background with mental health and in the school system, and us being friends with a lot of people that are involved with it, I just assume everybody knows. But that's part of the reason why we're here, because October is actually Domestic Violence Awareness Month. So we thought it'd be good to have you on to spread some awareness about risk factors and kind of where this stuff comes from and what we can do about it.
Right. We try every October we go into the counties that we serve, which are St. Francis, Iron, Madison, St. John, and Washington. And we try to promote awareness by having community meetings, small fundraising. We have some silhouettes that we put in the hospitals that talk about different things. We try to do as much as we can with a staff of basically 11 people. But when I say that those services are provided in that county, that doesn't mean that we just take people that need our help from those 5 counties. We have several clients that come from, they come from all over. We've had out of state, we've had out of country, but we get a lot from St. Louis because there's only like 3 or 4 shelters in that huge metropolitan area. So there's a program out of St. Louis called Alive, and they provide transportation. So they'll bring, somebody down, and they either love it or hate it. That's kind of funny. We give them a heads up, like, listen, you're coming to a rural area. We don't have public transportation. We have sounds at night. There's bugs. Because we've had people come, and within 24 hours, they've had somebody come pick them up because they don't like it down there. And it is rough because we're a mile and a half out of town. But what I was going to say is now we offer therapy. That's not something we've ever had, and it was always the number one request from people coming in is they needed counseling. So we're only allowed 10 hours a week through our grant, and we have a therapist that has like an equine therapy program.
Oh, cool.
So she also does regular therapy, but then mostly the kids, they go out to their therapy at her place. And it's very interesting, and it involves a lot that I didn't know about, but the certain horses are like, I don't know, they're trained in a way
more in tune to...
Yeah. Like if the kid is in a bad mood and not being, there might be one horse that tries to perk him up, or she has a horse that will give off the same attitude. Like, well, if you're going to be not nice to me, then I'm going to go over here and ignore you. And she does a lot for us. So we have that now. And like I said, we have the court advocate that goes for the legal processes, ex partes, orders of protection, guides you through your divorce process. She's not an attorney, but she can kind of tell you, okay, this is what's going to happen. We have a case manager now. That's not something we used to have. Before I had this position, I was the shelter manager, which means that you're managing the whole shelter and all the staff that work in the shelter. And on top of that, you're case managing with all of the clients that live there. So now Tracy Carroll is our assistant director and case manager. So she meets with each one. You have to have a goal. You have to have goals while you stay there, because you can't just flop on one of the beds because other people need that space. So we have 32 beds in our current shelter, and most of the time they're full. Sometimes we have a waiting list of people trying to get in, and you try to give them resources for other shelters in the area. I mean, you got one in Peevely, you've got one in Perryville, Sykeston, Cape, Poplar Bluff, and they're all almost always full. So I don't know. At this point, we're just kind of, it's a struggle.
There's a high need. And I know a little bit that you guys are funded somewhat through grant funding, but you also rely on your community and with fundraising. And is there any events that you have coming up that we could talk about that the community could help with? Yeah,
we actually, twice a year, we hold trivia nights. And
by the way, I've been to one of those trivia nights, or a couple of them, I think.
Yeah.
And they're always a lot of fun.
They are. They're fun. And I used to write the questions, and I bowed out of that because I just couldn't. And then we would rotate them through after a while. But now I've discovered a website, and you can pay $50 and buy your questions.
Oh,
and
cool.
It's the easiest thing ever. But October 28th is our trivia night at St. Paul Lutheran School, the gymnasium in Farmington. and it's $20, but that includes dinner. I know a lot of trivia nights, you pay $10, you can bring your own stuff. And you're welcome to bring your own stuff to this, but this this year we have chili and pizza and lots of desserts, and our spring trivia night usually has baked potato and pulled pork and stuff like that. So you're getting a meal. We have tons of raffle prizes. We have auction items. So and it's Halloween, so we encourage people to dress up, and you get there's a prize for the best costume, most team spirit, best decorated table. So it's a big deal, and we rely on those for funds for things that grants don't cover. It might be, a lot of times people are coming into shelter with a bag of their worldly possessions, and maybe it didn't include their medication, or maybe it was destroyed, or eyeglasses, or they limped it in on a spare tire. So, you can't have somebody come in and be like, all right, go do your life. We have to give them a hand up. There have to be things that to help you make those next steps. And if you need scrubs for your job, then, we're going to get you a couple sets of scrubs if we have the money,
Right.
Because the grants do mostly cover your personnel and large items, like one of our vans was purchased on a grant because that van's providing a direct service. So it's taking people to look for jobs. It's taking kids to school. It's whatever.
And I know a little bit of the grant world just from my own career. And they are pretty specific about what you can and cannot spend money on. But a lot of the times it's the day-to-day stuff, like you're talking about, some of those personal needs. And even off air, we were talking about, some of the documentation that you might need, like birth certificates or whatever it might be, to align these people for success in their life. And, we're kind of caught in the middle ground where we don't have those things, or we might not be able to pay it with grant funding. So that's when you rely on some of that fundraising.
Yeah, definitely. And it's such a process to get the Social Security, especially during COVID. You couldn't go anywhere. But it's like, to get the birth certificates, you have to have the Social Security card, but you also have to have the form of ID. And then we used to run into we need proof of residence. You need a piece of mail. Well, they're not getting mail here yet. So, then now they accept, what's called a residency letter that is signed by us and shows that the person's living there. But I just feel like you should be able to walk into the health department and there's a lot of people that aren't born in Missouri. So, across the board, I might pay $25 to Nebraska. I paid $125 to New Jersey a few months ago for one. So I almost feel like, everybody's got this birth certificate. It's federal in a way across the board. Why can't they all just be, free, or $10, $20?
And I see some of that myself just in the mental health world. It was like our systems aren't really set up and designed, I think, to help people in a lot of ways. And it more hurts than not. And that's a whole soapbox that we can get on off air. But I do know that you're a part of trying to make legislative changes.
Yes. We started the February, I guess it was 2019, working with Representative Dinkins out of Iron County. We took our idea so we go up once a year for legislative advocacy days. And what we're doing is we meet with each of the legislators from our counties just so they know we're still there. It's not, we don't usually go in asking for anything. It's like, hey, just wanted to, remind you we're in your area and, can we get your support, blah, blah, blah. And so we had approached this idea, and she was the one that seemed very interested in it. So we came home from Jeff City and wrote this bill at my kitchen table, which we Googled how to write a bill because it's not something I've ever done. And the goal of the bill was for anybody involved in a social service agency that was an unaccompanied minor, a victim of domestic or sexual assault. And what's funny is by the time the bill we hit COVID, it didn't go anywhere, but they had thrown stuff in it, which aggravates me because it didn't pertain in a way, which you'll hear about other people, like major bills in this United States, they get passed and then they throw this tiny little words in there that had nothing to do with the bill and they don't read it and it get passed, but whatever. Yeah. So the goal of the bill was to allow someone and their children a one-time birth certificate if they were involved with the agency because they are, I think they're $12 or $15 in Missouri, but it would help us so much because we're constantly passing out $12 to go get these birth certificates because you need to apply for a job. The kids need to be enrolled in school. Whatever it was, we needed these birth certificates for. And Social Security card's free, or why not just make these free? But COVID hit, it all fell apart. And hopefully this coming February, they will allow, because we haven't been able to do it the last 2 years, but we'll be able to go back up in February for advocacy days and try to maybe start it. Because it got through the first, what is it, the House? I'm not a government person, but it made it.
Sounds right.
Yeah, we had to go up and I had to testify about this bill and it passed through, I want to say the House. And then anyway, it made it almost to the end and then they closed session. The world stopped, because of COVID. But the world didn't stop at the shelter.
Right. Being good friends with you and knowing this is a passion of yours, where did this come from? Is this something that started out as just a job that you needed at the shelter and then from there it developed? Because my story is pretty similar to that.
Yeah, it's funny because when my parents divorced, my mom worked part-time. She was a teacher for North County and she worked part-time on the weekends at the shelter. And we lived on Church Street at that point, which was by the old shelter. And once in a while I'd go down there and it's just chaos. I mean, you've got umpteen children and umpteen parents and everybody cooks different. They parent different. It's chaos. And I can remember telling her, I will never work in a place like this. Like, this is horrible. And you have to also, I think, realize though that people are in survival mode when they come to the agency, and they've been in survival mode. So it's like parenting wasn't at the top of the priorities. It was making sure that this person's food was warm out of the oven so they didn't get beat down that night. I mean, and that's something that we have realized over the years is how much everybody that is coming into agency are just in survival mode. But anyway, I was like, I'll never work here. I don't ever want to do this. Well, I was working at the state hospital in Farmington. And it's where I met my husband. And I like to preference, we were both working there, nobody was a patient. And anyway, so we had this kid, right? And we're still working out there. Well, it gets to the point where he's getting ready to go to kindergarten. And I was working evening shift out there. And I was like, I'm never going to see this child because he's at school all day. I work on the evening. So my friend at the time, Carla, had said, well, there's a position open at the agency for a court advocate. And I didn't even have my associates at the time. I was working on it. I was like, what does that involve? And so she's like, you go to court with them, you help them fill out orders of protection, this kind of stuff. And I was like, all right. So I went and I applied and I got the job. And the first couple of years, so we work very closely with the Missouri Coalition Against Domestic and Sexual Violence out of Jeff City. And I would go to these trainings and I would go to different things. And I look back now at how much I've grown, because in the beginning I was like, well, I mean, why don't they just leave? Or, why did she just do that? Because I didn't understand. And that's where we run into a lot of families too that have given up on the survivors that we're working with because they feel like they're exhausted. Just leave, just be done. But it's not that easy. And especially if I have a felony, if I've been evicted from somewhere, I've never had a bank account, I've never held a job, and I was never allowed to take birth control. And now I have 6 children, and the world judges me because I can't afford these children that I have. Well, why did I make them? Well, it's because I wasn't allowed to take birth control. Or, there's so many different tactics that abusers, they do. And that's why we try to get out in the community and try to explain to people, because this is why it's this way, and we just have to continue to support them. I had been on the job 8 months, and I made pencil bags for all of the patrol cars in all of the counties we serve, city and county. And in the pencil bags were our information for them to give out when they go on a call, because law enforcement do not like domestic violence calls. And we try to, again, get in there and do trainings and educate them about, you don't question how many times you've responded to this. It's your job. You just do it. But that's a whole nother tangent, law enforcement. And we do have some good support from some local law enforcement. But anyway, I walk into Iron County, the sheriff is not even living anymore, so I can tell this story. And sometimes karma, Right. But I say, hey, this is what I've created. This is for all your patrol cars. And he said, well, down here in Iron County, these women learn to take a licking and keep on ticking.
Oh, wow.
And I had only been on the job, like I said, like 8 or 9 months. And I was like, oh, okay. I thought, well, why am I doing this? I don't even get why these people are But now, fast forward 18 years, I feel like I've grown leaps and bounds. And I've even told the coalition that in Jeff City, like there were statements that I would make at training where they were like, no, that's such a, we don't think that way, And I'm like, oh, but here I am. And like I said, I've been there 18 years and some days it's a struggle, Most of the days I love it. I love the people I work with. We have a very good board of directors who supports us. And if we have an idea, they're usually, all for it. But it gets frustrating when you kind of give and give and give and give and give. And then you do continue to see, mistakes made. And you're just like, you know what? Like when somebody leaves, if they come into shelter and they leave within a few days, and then you're like, no, don't go back. It's not going to get better. It's going to, When I first started, I would be like, see, we failed this person, or we didn't have any success. Well, the success is that she knows about us, or he knows about us now, and knows that they are welcome to come back, that there's no judging. We've had people 7, 8, and 9 times that have lived there. So you just hope that eventually they're going to gain all the tools and education every time they come to be able one day to just
Absolutely.
Cut it out.
And I do think part of what you're talking about to me is just advocacy. And here at the barn, if you listen to any of our stuff that we put out, we are advocates for mental health, and that includes that as well. And I know mental health is a big part of kind of what you guys do as well. Let me ask you this. What is domestic violence? If somebody doesn't know, what is domestic violence and who does it affect?
Okay, so domestic violence is control, coercion over somebody, because I think a lot of people's brains go straight to physical violence. And we see people that have experienced physical violence, but it's not like you're seeing on the Lifetime movie. So we might have somebody come in and maybe it was financial abuse. They were never allowed to have any of the money. They were never allowed to make any of the financial decisions. Therefore, the kids suffered, the victim suffered, whatever it might be. But past physical, you have emotional abuse, you have sexual abuse, you have financial, you have even religious. If you won't let me practice my religion because you don't believe in it, and so therefore you force me to do X, Y, and Z that's against my religion. It's a very broad topic, because we see it not only with intimate partner, we see it with family members. We've even had some developmentally disabled clientele who were being abused in the home where the person was supposed to be raising them or helping them live independently and whatever. So it's very broad, and it's funny you ask that, because I talk about it constantly, but then to ask me to give you the actual definition is like, it's bad.
Yeah. I just think people's brains automatically go to husband punching wife, and wife is hiding the black eye with the makeup, right? And because that's like the Lifetime version that you see.
Yeah.
But it can look like a lot of different things. And it sounds like what you're talking about is just someone using power to control
everything, every little tiny aspect, because you'll think, okay, dinner's hot tonight, I should be in the clear. No, they're going to find something else. But then when it blows up, so that's the eggshell period. We talk about they're walking on eggshells. You're trying to do everything right, but no matter what you do right, there's always going to be something wrong. And then we blow up, and then the violence happens. And then the next morning, or the next, like, let's say, because a lot of times you call the police, you have to deal with, well, we'll take you both to jail. We've heard that before. And there are ways to determine the primary aggressor and all that. But again, it takes time, takes work. So let's say you leave for the night, you're gone for 2 days, you come home. He or she is now the best thing since sliced bread. There's nothing but kind words. We're doing fun things. And that's where it's going to get you in the head, because you're like, okay, well, everything seems fine now. And then it slowly starts to build again. And it may only happen twice a year. Could happen weekly. I mean, there's no rhyme or reason behind it. Then you'll see the pattern, though. You'll see it start to, and who's suffering the most other than the spouse or the intimate partner are the children, because they're growing up in this house where they think that this is how you show somebody love. And we've seen that with kids that come into the shelter that just are absolutely disrespectful to their mother, because, I mean, they call them names, they hit on them, they do spit. I mean, the little guy we had recently, I can't even imagine what this kid saw, because he was saying things to me that shouldn't ever come out of a child's mouth. I mean, my 20-year-old son, if he would say them, I would be like, how do you even know those words? Like, It's so disturbing. And that's why it's so important for us to try to get into these schools and try to give these kids some education about what a healthy relationship is. I mean, it's normal to have an argument. My own husband and I have arguments, but there's not a kitchen plate that flies through the wall, or nothing in my home is broke from these arguments, And we did an interview years ago. It was with the Restorative Justice Program, I think, out at Potosi Correctional Center. And they flipped it kind of. So like, we interviewed the clients in the shelter about what questions you would like to ask somebody that has been a habitual abuser, for most of their life, whether that was why they're in prison or not. And then we went to this panel of men, and they answered the question, and every one of them, I mean, and these are death row inmates, were the dysfunction that was occurring in their home when they were a child. They either didn't have the father figure, and mom was trying to work 3 jobs so they were just running amok, or dad or random boyfriend or whatever was there, and maybe that they were some of them were sexually abused, along with mom being abused. I mean, it's just chaos.
And I think a lot of it is breaking the pattern, and I feel like that's what you're relying on, is trying to break those patterns.
Yeah.
And I've seen it with my own life. One of my first real jobs was working direct care staff at a juvenile detention center. And my upbringing, I come from, my parents, they're really great people. So my world was a little bit different from a lot of the kids that I was working with. Well, let's call him Kevin. There was a kid named Kevin that would come, and he'd be locked up, and I'd come into work and I'd go, okay, well, Kevin's back. And it was just habitual, and it would happen a lot. And I remember one time I went to his door. I was like, Kevin, why are you back here? It was like the 10th time he had been there since I was working. And he's like, Chad, you don't understand. He's like, my dad's in prison. My uncle's in prison. My older brother's in prison. I don't know anything else. And it was like a light bulb went off to me, is like, I don't know that world because I haven't lived in it, but it's how are we going to try to break that pattern? Because that's what he does know, right? So it's like, using advocacy and awareness to try to break those patterns of, hey, this isn't okay. It might be the world you're living in or the world you came up with, but we need to break that cycle.
Have you followed him? Like, do you know?
He's in prison.
He's in prison. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. It's so sad. We just, try. I don't know if you know the starfish story, but the starfish story could be kind of correlated with different lines of work. But what we've set it for is there was this old man walking on the beach, and there's a little boy, and he's picking all these starfish had washed ashore. So he's trying to pick them up and get them back in the water. And the old man says something like, there's way too many. You're never going to save them all. But each one he throws back in, he says, but I saved that one and I saved that one. So we realized that there's, like I said, we have 32 beds. So that could be 32 people needing our help. And then we have 60 plus in our outreach program. There's still thousands, millions, especially in other countries where this crap is still, they're able to do it. So it's like, as much as you can try to get out there and create awareness.
I was surprised. I looked up some statistics on where Missouri ranked. as far as domestic abuse, domestic violence amongst the other states. And I'm not sure what year it was from, but this list that I looked up had them third highest. So I would say even if that's a couple years old, we're probably still high on the list. And I think, too, it's a huge, massive problem. But I also think about the unreported issues and acts of violence and the things that we're talking about where it's not the the movie version of what domestic violence looks like, but it is the exertion of power over. So, I think reporting probably can be frustrating, and I'm sure law enforcement gets frustrated too because they get so many calls.
Right.
But we need to be reporting. And if we do see it or we do know of somebody, where can we call?
So we have a 24-hour hotline, which is 1-800-663-9929. We have a Facebook page, Southeast Missouri Family Violence Council. And on there, you're going to see upcoming events and you're going to see needs. I mean, one day we might need size 5 diapers, and the next day we might be looking for a size 9 anti-slip shoe for somebody to go to work. But as far as the unreporting, I mean, if your neighbor's house is being robbed or it's on fire, you call the police. This is just like any other crime. And that's where people are, oh, quit looking out the window. That's none of our business. Well, if the house was burning down, you'd call help. So, I mean, call and maybe, I mean, one of the big statistics is 1 in 3 women are, and I say women a lot. We do serve men. We provide a lot of court advocacy to men. We go into the 3 prisons in our area for what's called the Prison Rape Elimination Act that passed years ago and provide advocacy for sexual assault in prison. But men, that's underreporting right there. That's, we might have maybe 10 men a year call. So a lot of times people are like, you always say woman, 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 woman. Well, it's because that's 90% of whom I'm working with. But if you look, for example, you go to a school, let's say you work in a school, and you all are there on the first day for their health fair or whatever, and you see all these women. There are people around you that are victims of this and aren't saying a word because there's a stigma about it. And, here I have this happy-go-lucky family, and we go to football practice and we play baseball, and he's on the Elks, and when really what's going on at home, they don't want to, it's almost like they don't want to break that. They don't want people to think they have some sort of a dysfunction in their life.
Can you give us the number again? Yeah,
so it's the 24-hour number. It's 7 days a week. Somebody's going to answer that number. It's 1-800-663-9929. And even if you're not in this area, you're looking for something in your own area, we can give you resources for that. There's also the National Domestic Violence Hotline number, which I have not memorized. You could Google it.
We'll put it up on the screen.
Yeah. And so there are multiple shelters in Missouri. And, maybe you don't need shelter, but they offer support groups. They offer, and everything's confidential. That's the number one biggest thing that is pushed in our heads, through working there is the confidentiality. Nobody's going to talk about it or whatever. So yes, and follow us on Facebook. Like I said, Southeast Missouri Family Violence Council, and we have a website which is cmofvc.net.
And then if you are in the Southeast Missouri area, to give us the info on the trivia night again.
So it's October 28th. We ask you to, get your team together, everybody dress up. There's fun prizes. It's not your basic trivia. And I can tell you that like one of the categories this go round is sports numbers. So, I mean, like I see like that says Pujo, as my aunt used to call him. My 85-year-old aunt loved Pujo. And so that's number 5. So, I mean, it's that kind of thing, baseball numbers. It's fun trivia. You're supporting a good cause, and you might win a prize.
Yeah, show up. This is the Wellness.
And I'm the MC because It was so hard for us to get MCs over the years that finally I just started doing it.
Your brother wouldn't do that?
Well, he usually played on my mom's team.
Oh, okay. Okay. This is the Wellness Investors live from the Barn Studio. This is brought to you by Everest Counseling. Stephanie, longtime friend. I'm so glad that you came today. I'm so glad that we're trying to bring awareness to this very serious and to such an important topic. So thanks for joining us today.
Yes, thanks for having me.
All right.
Everest Counseling staff have a wide range of experience and backgrounds. Our variety in services helps us bring diversity to our staff and availability to our clients. Our staff wants to provide safe, professional, and excellent clinical service to our clients. Most of our career has been spent working with youth and their families through at-risk programs and school-based therapy interventions. Everest Counseling works from a collaborative, strength-based approach, assisting and supporting clients to be the author of their own lives. Everest Counseling works with clients experiencing anxiety, depression, disruptive behaviors, relationship challenges, self-esteem, and trauma. Everest Counseling is here to help you find your health and wellness. Please contact our mental health staff for any questions you may have.